The moment 7-year-old Lucas ran across the wedding reception hall and threw his arms around a complete stranger, calling out "Dad," with pure joy in his voice. Sarah's heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity, because the man her son was hugging was Michael, the ex-husband who had walked away 7 years ago, before Lucas could even form memories. The elegant ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and ivory roses seemed to spin around Sarah as she watched her son, who had never known his father, somehow recognize him with an instinct that defied all logic. And Michael's face, older now, with lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, crumpled with an emotion so raw it made everyone nearby stop and stare. "Mom always shows me your picture in her locket," Lucas said innocently, his small hands gripping Michael's suit jacket. "And she tells me stories about how you used to sing to me when I was in her belly, and I've been practicing that song, Dad. I know all the words now." Sarah's legs moved before her mind could process what was happening. Crossing the dance floor where moments ago couples had been swaying to a love song, and as she approached, Michael's eyes met hers for the first time in 7 years, sighs that held not the anger or resentment she had feared, but a deep well of regret and something that looked impossibly like hope. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice breaking on her name, while Lucas stood between them, one small hand reaching for his mother and the other still holding on to the father he'd just found, creating a bridge between two people who had once promised each other forever, and then shattered that promise into 1,000 pieces. The wedding guests, their old friends Emma and James, whose celebration this was, watched in hushed recognition as this unexpected reunion unfolded, knowing the history, remembering the young couple who had once been inseparable until life's pressures tore them apart. Michael had been 25 when he left, overwhelmed by the responsibility of fatherhood, drowning in debt from failed business ventures, convinced that Sarah and their unborn child would be better off without him, a decision that had haunted him every single day since, though Sarah never knew this. Having heard nothing from him after he signed the divorce papers and disappeared into what seemed like thin air, "I didn't know you'd be here," Sarah managed to say, her voice steady, despite the earthquake happening inside her chest, and Michael nodded, his hand tentatively resting on Lucas's shoulder as if he was afraid the boy might vanish if he let go. "Emma didn't tell me you were coming either," Michael replied, and then, looking down at Lucas, his voice became tender. "You look just like your mother, but you have my eyes, don't you, buddy?" Lucas beamed up at him with those distinctive green eyes, the exact shade of sea glass that Sarah had fallen in love with all those years ago, and said, "Mom says, I got your smile too, and your love for peanut butter and banana sandwiches, and your habit of humming when I'm happy. Is that true, Dad?" The word "Dad" seemed to physically impact Michael each time Lucas said it, like gentle hammers breaking down walls he'd built around his heart. And Sarah watched as the man who had once run from responsibility stood there, completely surrendered to a 7-year-old boy's unconditional acceptance. "Why don't we sit down?" Emma appeared beside them, ever the gracious host, despite her wedding reception having turned into something entirely unexpected, guiding them to a quiet corner table away from the main celebration, where the music was softer and they could hear each other speak. As they sat, Lucas immediately scooted his chair between his parents, chattering excitedly about his second-grade teacher, his soccer team, his best friend Tommy, filling the silence with the innocent details of a life Michael had missed entirely: 7 birthdays, first days of school, lost teeth, bedtime stories, scary thunderstorms, and triumphant bicycle rides without training wheels. Sarah watched Michael's face as he absorbed every word, saw him memorizing Lucas's animated expressions, the way he used his hands when he talked, just like Michael used to, and she found herself sharing small smiles with her ex-husband when Lucas said something particularly precocious or funny, falling into a rhythm that felt hauntingly familiar, yet completely foreign. "I became a teacher," Sarah said quietly when Lucas ran off to watch the cake cutting with Emma, leaving his parents alone for the first time. "Elementary school, just like I always wanted." and we live in that little blue house on Maple Street, the one we used to drive past and dream about." Michael's hands wrapped around his water glass so tightly she thought it might shatter, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with unshed tears. "I know. I've driven by it 100 times, but never had the courage to knock. And I know about your Teacher of the Year award, and Lucas's soccer championship, and the science fair project about butterflies, that won first place." The confession hung between them like a suspended breath, and Sarah felt anger rise in her throat, anger that he'd been there, watching from afar, but never reaching out. But before she could speak, Michael continued, "I started therapy 5 years ago, Sarah, real therapy, not just running away from everything. And I've been sober for 4 years, 3 months, and 16 days. And I built a construction company from nothing, legitimate work, honest money, because I wanted to become the man you deserved, the father Lucas deserved, even if I never got the chance to prove it." The wedding music shifted to something slower, couples returning to the dance floor, and Sarah noticed Lucas watching them from across the room with Emma, his young face full of hope that made her chest ache with the weight of protecting his heart, while also recognizing his need for the truth. "Why now?" she asked, not accusingly, but genuinely curious. And Michael looked at where their son stood. "Because Emma called me last month, told me you'd be here. Told me Lucas had been asking questions about his father, drawing pictures of a family with 3 people instead of 2. And she said maybe it was time to stop punishing myself and start showing up instead." Sarah wanted to be angry, wanted to protect the life she'd built, the careful walls she'd constructed around her heart. But looking at Michael's face, older, wiser, marked by his own struggles, she saw not the boy who had run, but a man who had fought his way back. "He has nightmares sometimes," she found herself saying, "about being left alone, about people disappearing, and I never knew how to explain why his father wasn't there without making him feel like it was his fault or poisoning him against you. So I told him stories about the good times, about who you were before everything fell apart, hoping that if he ever met you, he'd see the man I fell in love with instead of the one who left." Michael's composure finally cracked, tears sliding down his cheeks as he whispered, "I'm so sorry, Sarah. Not just for leaving, but for making you carry this alone. For letting my fears rob Lucas of a father, rob you of a partner. And I know sorry doesn't fix 7 years, but I need you to know that not a single day passed when I didn't think about both of you, dream about what I was missing, hate myself for being too much of a coward to face what I'd done." Lucas appeared at their table then, holding a piece of wedding cake, his eyes moving between his parents' emotional faces with the intuition children possess when the adult world shifts around them, and he said quietly, "Are you sad because you missed each other? Because I missed you too, Dad. Even though I didn't know you, I missed you in all the empty spaces." The profound innocence of his words shattered whatever remained of the barriers between them, and Michael opened his arms as Lucas climbed into his lap, and Sarah found her hand reaching across the table without conscious thought, finding Michael's fingers and holding on as their son settled between them, creating a tableau that looked like a family even if they hadn't been one for so very long. "I want to earn the right to be in your lives," Michael said, his voice steady now, despite the tears, looking at Sarah with a determination she remembered from when they were young and believed they could conquer anything together. "Not as your husband, I know that bridge is burned, but as Lucas's father, as your co-parent, as someone who shows up and stays this time, who proves every single day that people can change, that mistakes don't have to be permanent, that love, even broken love, can be rebuilt into something different, but still beautiful." Sarah felt Lucas's small hand slip into hers, his other hand holding Michael's, and she thought about all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, all the times she'd had to be both mother and father, all the anger and hurt she'd carried like stones in her pocket, and she realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or pretending the past didn't happen, but but about choosing to build something new from the ruins of what was lost. We would start slow, she heard herself saying, surprising them both, supervised visits at first, you earning trust, bit by bit, Lucas getting to know you without pressure or promises we're not sure we can keep, and therapy, all of us, together and separately, because this isn't a fairy tale where everything magically fixes itself. This is real life, where healing takes time and work, and probably more tears than any of us want to cry. Michael nodded eagerly. Anything, Sarah, any terms you set, any pace you need. I just want the chance to know him, to show you both that the man who left isn't the man sitting here now. That sometimes people need to lose everything to understand what really matters. The wedding photographer approached, asking if they wanted a family photo, since they looked so beautiful together in the soft lighting. And before Sarah could explain the complexity of their situation, Lucas piped up, "Yes, please, our first picture all together." And his joy was so pure that neither adult could bear to correct him. So they stood, Michael lifting Lucas onto his hip, Sarah standing close enough that her shoulder touched Michael's arm. And they smiled, not the fake smiles of posing but genuine expressions of hope, mixed with uncertainty, mixed with the terrifying possibility that broken things could indeed be mended. As the evening progressed, they found themselves talking more easily. Michael asking about Lucas's favorite books, Sarah sharing stories about their son's quirks and talents, Lucas basking in the attention of having both parents focused on him, and the other wedding guests gave them space, recognizing that something profound was happening in their corner of the celebration. He has your musical gift, Sarah told Michael as they watched Lucas dance with Emma's flower girl, plays piano by ear, just sits down and figures out melodies like you used to do. And his teacher wants him to audition for the youth symphony. But I didn't know how to explain why his father wouldn't be at the concert. Michael's voice was rough when he replied, "If you'll let me, I'll be at every concert, every game, every school play, every moment he'll allow me to witness, making up for lost time not by trying to erase it, but by making sure no more time gets lost." As the wedding wound down and guests began leaving, Lucas had fallen asleep against Michael's shoulder, his small body completely trusting. And Michael looked at Sarah with wonder. He just accepts me, like I never left, like love doesn't keep score or hold grudges. How is that possible? Sarah touched their sleeping son's hair gently and said, "Because children love with their whole hearts until we teach them not to. And I tried so hard to keep his heart whole, to let him love you, even in your absence, hoping that maybe someday, though I never really believed someday would come." They walked to the parking lot together, Michael carrying Lucas, and when they reached Sarah's car and transferred the sleeping boy to his car seat, Michael stepped back, respecting the boundary of their separate lives, even as Lucas's small hand stayed fisted in his shirt until the last moment. "Can I see him next Saturday?" Michael asked, and Sarah nodded. "The park on 5th Street, noon, 2 hours to start. And Michael, don't you dare disappear again. Don't you dare give him hope and then take it away. Because I can survive you breaking my heart twice, but I will never forgive you if you break his." Michael met her eyes with a solemnity that felt like a blood oath. "I swear on everything I've learned, everything I've suffered, everything I hope to become, I will never leave again. I will show up Saturday, and every day after that, you'll allow, because Sarah, these 7 years taught me that success means nothing if you have no one to share it with, that running from fear just creates bigger fears, and that a man isn't measured by his failures, but by his willingness to face them and make amends." As Sarah drove away, she watched in the rearview mirror as Michael stood in the parking lot, hand raised in goodbye, looking like a man who had been given a second chance at life itself. And beside her, Lucas stirred in his sleep and mumbled, "Dad came back, Mommy, just like in my dreams." And Sarah realized that sometimes life's greatest gifts come wrapped in the very things we feared most. The next Saturday, Michael arrived at the park an hour early, sitting on the bench with a gift bag containing 7 small wrapped packages, one for each birthday he'd missed, and when Lucas ran toward him with arms wide open, Sarah saw on Michael's face the expression of a man being reborn through his child's forgiveness. Over the following months, they built something new and tender, not trying to reconstruct their old relationship, but creating something entirely different. Family bound not by marriage but by shared love for a remarkable little boy who had somehow always known his father would return. Michael attended every soccer game with embarrassing enthusiasm, cheering too loudly and mortifying Lucas in the best possible way. And Sarah found herself laughing at his antics, remembering the young man who had once made her believe in forever, seeing glimpses of him in this older, wiser version, who had learned the hard way that some things are worth fighting your demons for. There were difficult days, therapy sessions where old wounds bled fresh, moments when trust felt too fragile to bear the weight of hope, but Lucas was their bridge. His unconditional love for both parents, creating a safe space where healing could slowly, carefully take root. The day Lucas's teacher called them both Mr. and Mrs. Patterson at a parent conference, neither corrected her, and afterward, in the parking lot, they laughed at the awkwardness until tears came. And Michael said, "We're not husband and wife anymore, but we're something, aren't we? Something unique and precious and worth protecting." Sarah agreed, and as she watched Michael teach Lucas to throw a baseball in the fading light, she realized that forgiveness wasn't about going backward, but about moving forward with wisdom. That love could transform into different shapes without losing its essential power. And that sometimes a family isn't broken but simply rearranged into a pattern that, while unconventional, perfectly fits the people they've become. The night of Lucas's spring concert, where he played a piece he'd composed himself, called My Dad's Song, the melody Michael used to hum to Sarah's pregnant belly. There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. And as they stood together applauding their remarkable son, Michael whispered, "Thank you for keeping my memory alive in him when I didn't deserve it." And Sarah whispered back, "Thank you for becoming the man he believed you were all along." Emma, whose wedding had unknowingly orchestrated this reunion, often said that some things are written in the stars but take their time arriving. That love isn't always linear, that families can be broken and whole simultaneously, and that the courage to show up after failure is perhaps the greatest courage of all. Years later, when Lucas gave his valedictorian speech, he thanked his parents for teaching him that love isn't perfect but persistent, that people can change if given the chance and the choice, that forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves as much as others, and that sometimes the best families are the ones that choose each other over and over again, especially after they've fallen apart. And as Sarah and Michael sat in that auditorium, no longer married but forever connected, they knew that their unconventional love story, marked by loss and redemption, had given their son the greatest gift of all, the knowledge that love, in all its imperfect forms, always finds a way home.